Hello and welcome to the Black Robe podcast. I am Carol Mitchell, your host for this evening. I'm very excited to have none other than Lowell Wise. Let me get these letters right, Lowell. PhD for those of you who know how much of work those letters take out of a person, how much effort. Lowell is an English professor turned urban forest advocate, which is an interesting transition to say the least. And he's here tonight as the executive director of the Tacoma Tree Foundation. They are part of our new expanded network of friends and collaborators. We connected with them little under, maybe 6 months or so ago on a fabulous project where we planted trees for equity at the Nettie J. Asbury House in Tacoma, Washington. So welcome to you, Lowell. I do want to talk a little bit more about your great work in college writing and literature and environmental humanities. I think I'll let you talk about your book, and then we're going to talk about green blocks. There's a very, I would say, innovative and transformative project that Tree Foundation is engaged in that caught our attention. And so we're so glad tonight to have you here with us. So let's start talking about the book that has such an interesting name, and then tell us about Tacoma Tree Foundation and Green Blocks.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's great to be here. I didn't expect to start with my book, but it's as good a place as any. I was trained as a literary scholar, and at the same time, my passion was always the environment and the natural world and how humans and nature connect. And so my book is called Ecospatiality, a place-based approach to American literature. And it's all about reading literature with a lens of place. And for me, that means something about nature, something about geography and kind of the spatial relationships, and then also the history, especially understanding the environmental history and the stories that go into a place and kind of define a place. So that's really the lens that I approach all my work with. And I made a transition from academia to the nonprofit world about 1.5 years ago. And I kind of haven't looked back, but I still bring this place-based lens to everything that I do, and also kind of a social justice lens to the work that I do. So I can say more about that in a minute.
Well, that social justice lens is what caught our attention, of course, because, Institute for Black Justice, that's our bread and butter, as my mother would say, and
Absolutely.
our passion and our purpose. So some people might wonder, listening to this podcast, what the hell does trees have to do with social justice? So break it down for us, Lowell.
All right, I will. Yeah. Well, I think first of all, where we live now in the Puget Sound region, it's really urbanized, but it wasn't always that way. So I always start with thinking about what this land was like before the time of settlement, living on the land of the Coast Salish peoples, and thinking about how they cared for and stewarded the environment for centuries before anyone else arrived here. And in many ways, I think what cities are trying to do is go back to some of those ways of taking care of the land, recognizing that this land is meant to be forested, and now trying to figure out how that mixes with the design of a modern city. So we're trying to do things like put more trees in the ground to stop polluted stormwater runoff, because the biggest source of contamination in the Puget Sound that kills the salmon and hurts orcas and other wildlife is just water that runs off our streets and driveways and everything. So trees help with that. And that's one of the ways that we're trying to just improve the quality of life in the area. But it's not just about trees and salmon. It's really about people. So when I think about trees, I think about all the benefits they have for our health and for our communities. And just to zoom out a little bit for a second, the the area in kind of urbanized Pierce County is we talk about it as having a tree canopy or having an urban forest. And an urban forest just means all the plants that go together to kind of create the habitat that we have that's mixed of urban and vegetation, I guess. So every tree is kind of part of this idea of an urban forest or a canopy. And it's that infrastructure that helps shade our communities. It helps to give us clean air to breathe. And shade is really important because in some neighborhoods, it can be hotter than other neighborhoods. So we know that neighborhoods that don't have as many trees tend to be hotter in the summer. And it can be anywhere from 10 to 20 degrees hotter on a really hot day. So that's a big difference if we're talking about the difference between 80 degrees in a cool neighborhood and 95 degrees in a neighborhood with no trees. And what we know from the data and the research is that the tree coverage is tied to social and economic data. So neighborhoods that don't have trees haven't been invested in the past, and that often means that folks with lower incomes and more diverse racial ethnic populations don't have as many trees to benefit from right outside their doors. So it has a lot of impacts on how we move about the world. I'm in a neighborhood in downtown Tacoma that has about a 6% tree canopy coverage, and I live right next to the Interstate 5. So you know
Oh,
that my air quality where I live probably isn't very good, and that has a lot of impact on how we go through the world.
well, the Tree Foundation, so we should talk about how you got there just briefly, but you are in the midst of what I would consider a transformative effort to change that stark reality of the differentiation that exists based on the economic, sort of the correlated economic implications of that for the long-term well-being of our families that live in these disinvested neighborhoods. And a lot of those families are Black and brown families, just because that's just the nature of the beast that we deal with. Our social inequities have contributed to that result. And now Tree Foundation is trying to do something about it to
Yes.
mitigate that years of disinvestment and neglect. So what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, it's a big task, and it's gonna take a lot of effort and a lot of collaboration. So we're not the only ones working on this, but we're the only community-based organization that's working on this issue in the Pierce County area. So as far as we know. And so what we're trying to do is tap into existing communities and work with neighborhoods and different communities that want to bring a change to their neighborhoods to see more green, because they want to make their neighborhoods, I don't know, more beautiful, friendlier, more walkable. In a lot of ways, trees are tied to community safety, where we have neighborhoods with trees that tend to have lower crime rates and slower traffic speeds even. So there's a real safety issue here as well. But I think our values are really around trying to have a community-based approach. And that's why we try to seek out projects and funding where we can spend an extended amount of time in a neighborhood and build some relationships, build some community, and then help people bring resources to their own communities to invest in ways that they haven't been able to in the past. So in this this year, we're doing a project in Parkland, and Parkland is one of the neighborhoods with the lowest tree equity, and that's a term that's being used now to understand this relationship between tree coverage and the economy and racial and ethnic diversity. And so there's actually a resource called treeequityscore.org where you can
Mm,
go and see a map of all Puget Sound and see how it compares to other communities and also the nation. So what we know from that map is that Parkland has one of the lowest tree covers, and it has some of the highest racial ethnic diversity, some of the most income diversity in the city or in the urban area. And we're spending some time there to help people green up their neighborhood and their properties.
You know what's interesting about Parkland, because I'm an East Pierce County girl, so I grew up in beautiful downtown Spanaway. and, and we used to roll through Parkland on the weekends on our way to the skating rink in Tacoma. Because we didn't even have a skating rink at that time, Lowell. You want to talk about deprivation. Nothing out here except dairy farms. But what's interesting about Parkland is on the periphery, you have these almost estate-like residences, right? The president of PLU, and my understanding, you know, the big name muckety mucks of of Pierce County, and they live, you know, along the periphery of Spanaway Loop Road in these. In fact, Lowell, did you know that I hardly believed it, but there are $1 million houses being sold along Spanaway Loop Road right now. Brand new $1 million houses. They cut down all the trees to build them. Now, the irony of that, given what you're trying to come to Parkland to do, just did not go unnoticed by me. As I was driving home on Spanaway Loop tonight, I thought, I'm going to mention this to Lowell.
I have not heard of that, but that doesn't surprise me. I mean, anywhere that we have economic disparity, we're going to have a disparity in the natural environment and the natural systems. In some ways, people have to be able to afford to keep trees on their property, because there is sometimes maintenance for large trees that has to happen. And so historically, it's just been easier sometimes to cut a tree all the way down, as opposed to worrying about whether a certain limb is going to fall on a house or on a car or something. And so that's a real issue. I think wealthier people have been able to afford that kind of tree maintenance. And so it kind of makes sense. But also, I was just thinking, you know, Tacoma has its economic disparity. The north end is where most of the wealth is, northeast Tacoma. In Lakewood, it's an east and west divide. And so it makes sense that Parkland would have a similar divide at some point.
Yeah, because we have the man-made lake out there, you know, well, Spanaway Lake, but all along that corridor on Spanaway Loop is sort of where the Richie Rich, that's what we used to call him. Richie Rich lives in that house. But what it brings up for me, Lowell, is this issue of development, right? And the tension between needing more housing because the population of the county is growing, and moving south because they can't afford to live or buy a house inside the Tacoma city limits anymore, many people. So everybody's moving south, and so there's pressure to develop land that, like what I grew up around, that used to be dairy farms and, you know, horse ranches and whatever. So what's your feeling about that tension? How do we want the tree canopy to expand, and we know that there are health benefits to doing that, but we also have this pressure of needing more housing, which is probably one of the primary reasons why the trees are cut down. What's your sense? What's your take on that?
It's such an important question and a tricky one. At the Tree Foundation, we believe that housing and trees go together, and that we need a lot more housing and we need a lot more trees. And the current standards are that it's totally legal for developers to completely cut down the trees on a property before they build. And as long as, at least in Tacoma, as long as they put new trees in the ground, that's considered okay by the city permitting office. But obviously, a large tree has a different value than a baby tree. And it's going to take decades for the value of the baby tree to catch up to what it's replacing. So I would say cities need to work really hard on tree regulations to make sure that developers don't have that kind of power where they're allowed to just cut all the trees down and remove all those benefits with them. And some of the benefits that we haven't talked about include mental health. Like we know that if kids have trees outside their school window, their scores are better than kids with no trees outside the window. It's just a really basic human development thing. And then too, another thing I wanted to mention was just the life expectancy in Tacoma and Pierce County. It differs by 7 or 8 years, depending on what neighborhood you live in. So that's a really big thing. And it's not just trees, but we know that trees are part of the solution to having a better quality of life, having better health, lowering asthma rates, those kinds of things. Air quality really matters. And increasingly, we know that shade is really important as a safety issue. So we're specifically bringing trees that are going to grow to a nice mature size and help to cool off the Parkland neighborhood.
So let's talk about green blocks, because that is your offering to the families, the businesses in Parkland.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Green Blocks has been a long time in development, but it essentially means that we are spending a lot of time in Parkland right now as Tacoma Tree Foundation, and we're spreading the word far and wide about these resources that are available to families. And this is primarily designed for families who have not been able to invest in trees on their property in the past for whatever reason. Maybe it's a lack of interest, maybe it's a lack of education around how to plant or care for a tree. And so we're trying to address some of those gaps and allow people to invest in their homes in this particular way. It is designed for residential properties. So what we're offering right now is 200 trees that Pierce County has agreed to pay for. And we are doing the work of facilitating finding homes for all those trees. And we're pretty confident right now that we might be able to move past that 200 number and even offer more trees depending on demand. So we would really like it if we had demand for even more trees so that we can show the importance of the program and continue to offer it to different communities in the future. But there's really two main components. One is the tree distribution aspect, where folks can request trees from us. And we're able to offer with Green Blocks options for people. We think a lot about barriers to tree planting. We've talked about the cost of the tree. Some of these trees can cost, over $100 per tree. And so we're able to provide those for free. We're also offering delivery. If you want to have the tree delivered to your doorstep, we can do that. And we're going to use volunteer help to offer planting assistance. So if you have any doubt about your ability to put the tree in the right place or to dig the hole correctly, whatever it may be, we can actually send a volunteer team right to your property on February 25th and help you put the tree in the ground. So
that is great.
Yeah, it's something that we've been developing over the last year in terms of using our volunteer expertise that we have, because we have a lot of tree experts on our board and in our community that know how to do this stuff. And it's not rocket science, but it does take some know-how. And so we'll be offering like a tree planting demonstration, I hope, on February 25th. And then for those that want the extra help, we can go right to your door, show up with a tree and put it in the ground before the end of the day.
Now, you had a kickoff on January 31st. And you've got a series of activities happening fairly quickly between now and February 25th. How else can the community get engaged, and what else do they need to do?
The primary way folks can get engaged would be to sign up to volunteer. If you want to be part of our crew that goes to folks' houses and helps plant trees, we definitely want people to sign up for that opportunity. We don't have enough volunteers yet, and we want to make sure that anyone who wants planting assistance can get it. So you don't need any prior training. We'll have team captains that have some experience that can show you everything you need to know. So that's a really fun way. You can even sign up in small groups, potentially, if you have a group of 2 or 3 or more friends who want to volunteer together. Let us know that you want to be on a team together, and we can set you up with that. And then it becomes like a bonding thing on a Saturday in February. Part of our deadlines here are just ecological. So
Mhm.
in the Northwest, our planting season is it's basically the rainy season. So October through March is our main planting season. So that's why we're hoping that we can plant everything by the end of February to give the trees the best head start that we can. And then we'll also give people tips on how to water the trees throughout the summer so that they have a good head start and they can survive in the hot summer. The other opportunity I want to mention is something called a tree stewards training, and that's happening on February 18th. So the idea here is for the people who are really excited and motivated to learn more about trees and learn more about how they can bring trees to their neighborhood, we're offering this workshop. It's a 5-hour workshop, lunch is included, and we're offering a stipend of $100 for people who participate, just to compensate folks for their extra time. And the outcome of this is going to be that people walk away with more knowledge of how to plant a tree, how to prune it and care for it as it gets older, and then some tips on how to talk to neighbors. We know that tree planting and social cohesion are tightly correlated. So it's actually a great way to get to know your neighbors, to say, hey, I'm planting a tree. Are you interested in helping me? Are you interested in bringing any trees to your property? How can we work together to make the community greener and healthier? So the tree stewards training is a great opportunity to do that.
I think it is. I mean, I was just sitting here imagining if I drove by a tree that I helped to plant and saw it as it grew over time, what a powerful experience that would be, sort of like people who build buildings and, do that type of work when they drive by and see the finished product or see how people interact with some work that they've done. I could
Yeah.
see how that would really, it would, it would allow people to bond over something, in the natural environment that maybe it could be in unexpected ways.
Yeah.
People would find something in common and something to celebrate
Yes.
together. Maybe that's the tree where all of the barbecues, I don't know. That's the house where all the barbecues happen, the house with the tree planted.
Well,
But
yeah, it's a shared experience, first of all, to work together, put some sweat, dig a hole. It's really kind of fun. And then it also brings you together in a unique way, like, hey, we did this together. But then on top of that, you get to watch that tree grow. And you might come back in 25 years and your neighbor might still be there and you might remember how you did that. And now it's shading the street, giving people somewhere to walk or to gather. So you're absolutely right. A year and a half ago, when I first started this work, I worked with, I think, 5 different houses on my block to bring 17 trees to our street. And we just decided to plant them all at the same time. And people showed up who were not even invited on the list. People just wanted to help out. And it's one of my best memories already of a tree planting that I've done. Because it was personal, and now you're exactly right. We get to watch the trees grow and the benefits only grow over time.
so what's the best way for I can just envision the high schools out here in Parkland, Franklin Pierce High School, Washington High School, Keithley Middle School. I can envision, and a number of smaller private schools getting excited and being very interested in participating. So what's the best way for them to sign up and find out more?
The best way is to go to our website. There's a page for this specifically. So our website is tacomatreefoundation.org, and it's Green Blocks Parkland with hyphens in between. And so that's really the best resource with all the information about the program. But people can also email us at info@tacomatreefoundation.org if they want to get involved. We would love to have people of all ages involved in this project. One opportunity I didn't mention too is for people who do not sign up in advance. Folks that sign up in advance to receive trees will kind of go to the top of the list, and we'll be prioritizing people from the Parkland neighborhood for sure. But we're also having a walk-up event with additional trees available on February 25th. I believe it's from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And so that's when people who might not necessarily live in Parkland, but maybe live in the surrounding area would be welcome to come and ask questions. And we've got
Don't
extra
tell me
trees.
that.
We've got extra trees for backyards and other places across the county. So
Where's all this going to be happening on February 25th? Where is ground zero?
our home base is going to be the Sprinkler Recreation Center right there in Parkland. And so that's also where the tree steward training is happening the previous week. And our hope is that we'll get a lot of people interested in the tree steward training, and those folks will end up volunteering with us on February 25th. Once they've got all their new knowledge, they can take it out in the community and actually put some trees in the ground.
Well, thank you, Lowell. It has been a pleasure to end a very busy, intense day with you. I know you were doing your big kickoff today, and this is probably the final thing between you and dinner and relaxation. So thanks for taking the time to be with us on the Black Robe podcast tonight. And thank you to our audience as well for watching. Please get out and be part of Green Blocks in Parkland. And who knows, maybe you'll impress Lowell so much that your neighborhood will be the next place that he shows up with free trees. So thank you very much, Lowell, and thank you to your volunteers. I can tell you people from personal experience how powerful it was for us to plant our hopes and dreams with the tree. I think the redbud, is that what we planted?
The redbud.
At the Betty J. Asbury home in Tacoma. So every time I drive by there and see that tree, I think about equity and justice for all that we put in the ground that day. So that's my message too. You know, plant an intention along with that beautiful new tree, an intention for growth and revitalization of the Parkland area, Parkland Spanaway, because, you know, Sprinkler's kind of right on the border there, but it's definitely a place where that deserves joy and vibrancy, and trees can bring both of those. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking, as one final comment, just thinking about the connection back to places and stories. Every tree is also kind of a story. You know, we talk about planting hopes and dreams, but we're also working together on a story. And yeah, thinking about each tree and the life that it will have is really meaningful.
Do you have an age limit on who can help with the planting?
It's really all ages. I think if young people come, we would want them to be with a parent. But it's one of the best things about our events, actually, is that we've got old people, young people, anyone who can grab a shovel and doesn't mind working a little bit on a Saturday. So yeah, everyone's welcome, but we want kids to be supervised.
Pacific Lutheran University is like right around the corner. Come on, PLU Lutz, get out here and help plant these trees. Carol Mitchell said so.
We've got quite a few Lutz out there helping to pass out our flyers this week and next week. So appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Lowell. And you know, my heart is happy. And I think, you know, as I think about the work you're doing, it seems like such a simple thing, you know, plant a tree. But boy, I'm one of those people that I love my trees, and I love just looking at them, watching them, the rhythm of the tree, the movement, all of that is very therapeutic for me. Maybe I'm kind of a country girl deep down under all this fancy city slicker stuff I put on the outside. So I really appreciate what you're doing, especially in communities of color or communities of low socioeconomic status that want to live just as long as other parts of Pierce County and of the world. People want to live and breathe freely, and you contribute to that. So we appreciate you greatly. And we're going to say good night to our audience, and we will see you the next time on the Black Robe podcast. Goodbye.